This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Friday, September 3rd, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. Today, we're talking about a COVID-19 update here in Orange County and the state of Florida. Plus, we're also talking about a college football preview for this weekend and what the heck happened in Orlando yesterday. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and joining me today, I have Orange County government reporter Stephen Hudak and sports columnist Mike Bianchi. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Let's go ahead and get right into this. Steve, coming to you for one of your latest headlines here. Orange County adds over 200 COVID-19 deaths in August to Florida's record of 1,338. Now, these numbers coming out recently from this week. What have we learned so far?
The good news is that actually the positivity rate and the infection rate is slowing down. But deaths always lag a couple of weeks behind. On Monday, Dr. Pino told us that he's the state health officer. He told us we had 107 COVID deaths in August. Yesterday, I called him and just said, hey, can you give me an update on deaths since we're not going to have a second COVID briefing? And he said, it's been bad, really bad. The count for August is 210 deaths. Now, the reason that number can still go up even though we're in September, because it takes sometimes a couple of weeks to verify the date of death and the cause of death. So those numbers tend to, we tend to add a few here and there. He thinks that we're going to add more than a few because, as you guys probably remember, we had ICU units stacked full of COVID patients, and roughly 1 out of 2 of those people in ICU units with COVID, they die.
So, Steve, in your conversation with Dr. Alpino, did he indicate what percentage or how many of those deaths were attributed to those who were unvaccinated?
Yes. And this is the science part of it. 95% of the people dying are unvaccinated. And that has been steady since February when the vaccine became available. It fluctuates a little bit. It never leaves the 90s. Virtually 9 out of 10 people who die of COVID-19 in Orange County are unvaccinated. We hear all these things about breakthrough cases, which are, that's a real thing. Like if you're vaccinated, you can still get sick. What you usually don't do is you usually don't end up in the ER, don't end up in ICU, you don't end up on a ventilator, and you don't die. Unless you have other what they call comorbidities, like you might have heart disease or something else that COVID affects, or you're old. You're older than me, and I'm 62.
Wow. So that being the case, Steve, as you mentioned, some good news in the beginning of all of this, that there does appear to be a bit of a slowing rate. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Florida's been one of the worst states for infections and deaths for the last month and a half. Okay, Orange County's role in this, our positivity rate was about 20%. That means out of people who were tested, like 1 out of every 5 of them had the virus. We had an enormous number of new infections. Now that number has started to come down. We're at like 16%. Now that doesn't sound like much, but that's good because this is a steady decline. We went from like 21%, which was our high, to about 17.5%. Now we're at 16%. And as long as we don't have an enormous number of infections over the Labor Day holiday where people get together, maybe we'll be okay.
Certainly some grim details there with a little bit of shining light. If you're interested in finding out more details about that, be sure to take a look at Steve's story available right now at orlandosentinel.com. Steve, thank you so much. All right, Mike, I want to come over to you now for some pretty positive news coming out of Orlando today. UCF beat Boise State last night, bleeding into actually Friday morning in the Bounce House, 36-31. Mike, you saw this game. What'd you take away from it?
Yeah, I saw it as I was walking out of the press box at 3 a.m. this morning. 3 hour rain delay, longest game in UCF history, latest starting game in UCF history. Started off really bad. UCF fell behind 21-0. Some fans are booing their new coach, Gus Malzahn, and all of a sudden things switch. That's the great thing about sports. You never know what's going to happen. And what a comeback it was. Dylan Gabriel started lighting up Boise State's defense. UCF started running the football with this beast of a transfer they got from Northwestern, Isaiah Bowser. I mean, he's a 225-pounder, runs 33 times for 172 yards. It was a phenomenal debut for Gus Malzahn. I mean, again, for the fans who waited around and stuck it out for the whole game, and there were quite a few, quite frankly, it was one of those events people are going to talk about. And, sports fans in Orlando will talk about, hey, I was there when UCF came back in Gus Malzahn's first game. And again, national TV for whoever stayed up to watch it. It was gripping theater last night.
Mike, I also want to ask you a question here about something that we saw coming out of a report from The Athletic indicating that UCF might be up for an invitation to the Big 12. Can you tell us more about that?
The Big 12 evidently is talking about expanding right now, and the Big 12 officials are talking, and UCF is reportedly, according to ESPN and some others, UCF and three other schools are essentially candidates to join the Big 12, and it seems like it's going to be imminent that UCF is going to at least get an invitation to join the Big 12. So again, remarkable day for UCF yesterday.
Really exciting way to start off the season there, Mike. But we've got more Florida football going on this weekend, and we got a couple previews here to talk about. The first one I want to get into is UF versus FAU at the Swamp. What's your predictions on this?
The Gators should have no problem whatsoever with FAU. They're favored by 23.5. FAU, of course, coached by Willie Taggart, who couldn't even last 2 seasons at Florida State. Florida's breaking in a new quarterback, though, Emory Jones, to replace Kyle Trask. Everybody knows how great Kyle Trask was last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how Emory Jones responds. Now, he's played some as a backup and then had some packages in Dan Mullen's offense. But when you're the man, it's different. It's going to be interesting to see how he responds to being the starter.
Absolutely. And we do have one other game here that I want to talk to you here about, Mike, and that is, of course, at the tail end of the weekend, FSU versus Notre Dame in Tallahassee. We might have some Knights who are interested in this game as well. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know who FSU starting quarterback is going to be, but everybody in Orlando, and including all of the sports writers, we're hoping it's Mackenzie Milton, the former UCF quarterback, who, of course, had that horrific knee injury 2.5 years ago against USF. There was a thought he might have to have his leg amputated. Doctors and surgeons didn't think the guy would be able to even walk without a limp again, and now here he is making a comeback up at Florida State. Of course, he transferred from UCF because his best friend Dylan Gabriel became a really good starting quarterback at UCF. So Mackenzie Milton didn't want to try to make a comeback and compete with Dylan Gabriel for the job at UCF. So he transfers to Florida State, and he may start Sunday night on national television against Notre Dame, one of the most storied programs in college football. If he somehow trots out on that field, starts the game, and oh my God, if he were able to win that game and pull the upset, it would be a better movie than Rudy. It would be better than Rudy. It would.
There you go, calling it now. Better than Rudy. If you guys are looking for details on those games, be sure to take a look at OrlandoSentinel.com, where, of course, you can find out about everything going on in our community and around the state of Florida. So be sure to take a look there. For those of you who are subscribers to the Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for continuing to support our work and supporting local journalism. If you want to become a supporter, it's easy to do so. All you need to do is visit OrlandoSentinel.com/subscribe. But as for OSN, that will do it for us today. A big thank you to Steve
Remember, the
and Mike.
Sentinel's always better than Rudy.
Absolutely, 100%. Take that to the bank. Thank you for that, Steve. And Mike,
Like
thank
the
you.
Sentinel's real, Rudy is fiction.
Guys, we'll see you next week. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on orlandosentinel.com.